Walter Cronkite earned the title the most trusted man in America, in large part because of the way he brought us two of the biggest stories of the 20th century. In September 1963, as fighting swelled in Vietnam, CBS's top newsman Walter Cronkite sat down with President John Kennedy to discuss the growing conflict.
Mr. President, the only hot war we've got running at the moment is, of course, the one in Vietnam.
I don't think that unless a greater effort is made by the government to win popular support that the war can be won out there. In the final analysis, it's their war.
Just 2 months later, the most trusted man in America broke the news that sent a country into mourning.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
I remember thinking, isn't that ironic? Just a couple of months ago, he was interviewing the president, and now he's reporting on his death.
Mrs. Kennedy holding back her tears.
He was America's anchor through some of the nation's darkest days, and when the story was most confusing, his approach was to take you there, himself. His straightforward reporting brought the front lines of the Vietnam War into our living rooms.
If the communist intention was to take and seize the cities, they came closer here at Hue than anywhere else.
Unafraid to share what he saw with the rest of the nation.
It is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
I think it pained him to have to say what he thought about Vietnam. But he thought he knew what the truth was, and he thought he had an obligation to tell it.
And joining us now are Sean McManus, president of CBS News and Sports, Susan Zirinsky, executive producer of 48 Hours, and in Washington, Bill Plant, CBS News senior White House correspondent. Good morning to you all.
Good morning, Harry.
Good morning.
I'm trying to think between Susan and Bill, who was around Walter first. Susan, how old were you when you went to work for Walter Cronkite?
Well, I was in the Washington Bureau. I was 19 years old.
And Bill, how old were you when you went to work for Walter?
About 26 or 7.
And we won't ask you how many years ago that was.
Please don't.
Bill, let me ask you first how important it was for you to go to work for CBS and what it meant to you to work for CBS and Walter Cronkite.
Well, CBS News was, as we used to say, the Tiffany Network. It was the tradition of Edward R. Murrow. And Cronkite carried on that tradition. I mean, we knew that he'd been a reporter in World War II and that he'd been a wire service guy, and we knew he was passionate about the facts. I mean, he didn't take that managing editor title lightly, let me tell you.
And when you turned in a script as a correspondent, Bill, for Walter Cronkite, knowing that he would see it, I can't even imagine the pressure of getting it right.
Well, you got that right. We were always braced for a question from Walter because he would review the scripts. But he also had a lighter side. I mean, he loved campaign gossip, for example. We would come in from the Nixon campaign or the Carter campaign. He'd want to know what was going on. I once asked him about the charges by both Democrats and Republicans that he expressed his editorial opinion by lifting his eyebrow. And he said to me, "Oh, hell no, it's just a twitch."
Sean, your father's path and Walter's path crossed in such interesting ways. Jim McKay was your dad. And was not Jim supposed to host the Olympics on CBS?
He was. In 1960 at the Squaw Valley Winter Olympics, my dad was scheduled to anchor the Olympic Games, his first time ever to do that. And he had what he later admitted was a nervous breakdown about a month and a half before the opening ceremonies. So they put Walter Cronkite in my dad's place in 1960 to anchor the Olympic Games. And by the time Rome came around that summer, my dad was ready to do the Summer Olympics. But I had lunch with Walter about a month after I got my job, and we talked about that, and we talked about how much my dad wanted to be a newsman when he was growing up. And Walter said, well, you know, if it weren't for Squaw Valley, maybe your dad would have been the anchor and I would have been the sportscaster. So they had a great affection and a love for each other also.
The other great story I want you to share is when your father was at the Olympics in Munich in 1972 and did such a remarkable job of telling everyone in America what had transpired in that horrible attack on the Israeli athletes. Tell about Walter sending a note to your dad.
Well, I was with my dad all day, and he was in the studio for 18 hours straight. And we got back to the hotel in the early morning hours. My dad went to the front desk to get his key, and the concierge said, "Mr. McKay, there's a telegram for you here." And my dad opened it up, and he read it to me, and it said, "Jim, you were superb yesterday. The profession and the industry has reason to be proud of you. Congratulations, Walter Cronkite."
And listen to this. Listen to this piece.
The greatest compliment of my career.
Jim, you were superb yesterday. The profession and the industry have reason to be proud of you. Congratulations. He did such an excellent job, and I thought he ought to know that we were appreciating it on this side of the ocean, and particularly in the newsrooms at the rival networks.
Did we ever?
What did that mean to your dad?
Well, we stood there and looked at each other. And it's one of those moments that you never forget for your entire life. And my dad looked at me and he said, "You know something? It's never going to get better than this, ever." And it was just, he had such great admiration. And Walter had his seminal moments during the Kennedy assassination, during the space program. And my dad's seminal moment really was the 1972 Munich tragedy that he covered so well. And to have Walter sent him the first telegram that he read after he got off the air was something he never forgot. In fact, he carried that telegram in his briefcase until the day he passed away.
We have another souvenir from Walter Cronkite, a script that Susan saved all these years. Tell us about that, Z.
Well, you know, as a young production secretary and kind of researcher called into battle during Watergate, you know, Walter was coming down back and forth, and obviously the culmination of everything was the night that Nixon resigned. And CBS did a special, and I had been busy ripping scripts for him in those days. You know, you had to type the scripts on a typewriter, and at the end of the night, everybody was kind of wasted. It was just a seminal moment for everybody. And Walter just had dumped the script into the trash can. And I picked it up and I said, "Walter, don't you think you want to save this script for historic value?" He goes, no, they transcribe everything in New York. And I thought, I'm with Walter Cronkite on a night of amazing history. I'm taking this document, and I have kept it all these years. The writer was Charlie West, but you can see Walter's corrections in there. And this is really what Walter was about. You know, the country traveled with Walter through tragedies, through moments like the Man on the Moon. And if I could just read like the last section, it's pretty extraordinary. And so, virtually on the eve of her bicentennial, the United States has passed through a day of historic drama, a day many of her citizens had been awaiting with dread, a day some feared would shred the fabric of her society. But the feared has not come to pass. As President Ford said in his acceptance speech, our long national nightmare is over. Our Constitution works. Our great republic is a government of laws and not of men. Here, the people rule. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News, Washington. Good night. I get a chill.
Me too.
And you know, even the copy, you know, it was an orderly succession. You know, there are just amazing lines in this. And I think as a 19-year-old going through what the country was going through, but also with Cronkite, there was a mission. There was nobody that didn't understand that Cronkite was about one thing, not about himself as the story. It was about seeking truth. And that's having that single voice to march under was really extraordinary. It was just the greatest seduction for me of all times as a 19-year-old.
Will there ever be another Cronkite, Sean?
No, I don't think so. If there is, I'd like to hire him, but I don't think he's out there. I tried to explain to my kids when I got the news of Walter's passing at dinner on Friday night that the way the media is right now, they can't understand that there was a time that if you wanted to get your national news on television, there was one place to get it, and that was on network television, either ABC, CBS, or NBC, and people chose Walter. And if you wanted to get your news, it was from Walter Cronkite. So I don't think anybody, with all the cable outlets and with the internet, I don't think anybody will have the kind of impact or the stature or the influence that Walter had. And how lucky are we that the one man who had that position turned out to be Walter Cronkite. And as Z said, he was all about the journalism, all about the writing, and all about the telling the story correctly.
I wanted to share a quick story. During the 50th anniversary of D-Day, we broadcast from Normandy, and I was fortunate enough to have as my anchor buddy Walter Cronkite, who of course had distinguished himself as a wire service reporter. In the invasion of North Africa, he flew in B-17s over the European theater. He was at the Battle of the Bulge, and be able to sit there with him at Colville-sur-Mer at that phenomenal American cemetery there, I have chills just now thinking about it. And he was so generous.
Yeah.
He was absolutely, unfailingly generous with his thoughts and his expertise and his goodness.
He wanted everyone to be as good as he was.
And for all of his talents, the thing that stands out for me the most is that he was the ultimate gentleman. And as Z said, it wasn't about himself, it was about the story. But if you were with him one-on-one, the warmth that just exuded from this man's character was just extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
And you know, he was very much the same on camera as off camera. There was no persona, there was no change of voice. You know, the avuncular Walter was the reality of who he was. He was magic.
Everyone called him Walter, from the intern to the
Absolutely.
producer to the president of the division.
Let me thank Bill Plant. Thanks very much for coming in this morning, Bill. Thank you. Appreciate it very, very much.
Harry, I have to tell you, it was Walter's presence, his reassurance, that helped people make sense of those troubled times in the 60s and 70s.
No question. Sean, Susan, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As we head to break, we bring you some words from CBS President and CEO Leslie Moonves.
Walter and I shared a floor. A couple of times a month, he would walk down to my office, or I would walk down to his, and we'd talk about the network news, the network, life in general. What a great guy. There's a reason Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. He had honor, he had integrity, and when he spoke, people believed him and they listened to him. I am so proud that Walter Cronkite represented the CBS family. He was the best America had to offer, and I'm so proud to have known him. My friend George Clooney and I have been emailing the last couple days. George and his father Nick were very close to Walter. George's last email was, "I don't want to live in a world without Walter Cronkite." Amen.